All right, you had a no start on the Crown Vic and you're trying to figure out why this daggum thing won't start. And so what did we do first?
Relay out.
Well, I'm not talking about won't crank. I'm not talking about the starter problem. I'm talking about when we got the engine to spin over, it wouldn't fire up. This is important now. Have they sent you out to check a no start? Have you had to go check a no start at Matt's place yet? Okay. Did you figure out why it wouldn't start? How'd you do it? Tell me the story. Come here. Tell me a story. Tell me a story, Webb. Come on. I know you're going to tell the truth because you always do. What is it? Talk to me.
We had a Ford Maverick.
Ford Maverick.
And the Dura spark box. I forgot to take a picture of it. I was going to show you. The Dura spark box. And it had the wires on the coil where it plugs in. It's got that big coupling with the 2 terminals on the coil on it.
Mm-hmm.
They had some wires yanked in the connector that goes to it, and they had it all mixed up. So you'd run it and get really hot. And the engine was looking for a ground, and they didn't have it on the ground. Wires hooked up on the motors to the chassis and everything.
Yeah.
So it was hunting the ground, and it found the ground, but it found it in the Dura spark box. And it got so hot, it melted all the guts.
Yeah.
And it slid all down the pinion wheel.
Yeah, sometimes those Duraspark boxes will do that even if there's not anything else wrong, but I get where you're going. Well, the first thing we're going to do is, and we've talked about this on other courses, we're going to check spark before we check anything else. Usually the Crown Vic's got the coil on plug though. It's a little aggravating to check spark on a coil on plug. I mean, you can pull it out and put your spark tester on it and it works. You can also put your spark tester on about a 50,000 volt gap and move from spark plug to spark plug. Now he's got IDS over there, I think. The Ford IDS thing, probably, I don't doubt it, with the power balance. But you can actually take that, you can take the spark tester and set it on 50,000 volts and check each one of them separately, and the one that doesn't fire is your bad coil. I mean, that's a little interesting to do that. But the long and short of it is, spark first, then fuel pressure. We check fuel pressure. What do we have for fuel pressure?
40 or 50 or 60.
Yeah, about 50 pounds. I mean, on that one is what we had on, because he kept saying fuel pressure. All right, somebody was saying they didn't hear the pump, but you got to make sure you're listening to the right place. We heard the pump's obviously working because we got 50 pounds of fuel pressure. Some of these guys weren't there when we did all this. What did we do next? Remember, Lee, you were there.
Injectors.
We were listening to the injectors, and we heard nothing. Okay, so what do we do after that?
Unwires.
Unplug wires.
No, wait a minute. You're jumping a step.
Oh, we checked to see if there's power to the injector.
Bingo. We checked to see if there's power to the injectors. There was voltage to the injectors on the red wire that came from the power relay, which also powers up the engine controller. We knew the engine controller was awake, though. How did we know?
Because it was lit. The light was on, it was getting power.
No, that doesn't tell you the engine controller is awake necessarily, because you have a broken wire between. There's another way we knew the engine controller was awake.
There's power to the injectors.
No, that don't tell you the engine controller is awake. Theoretically, it is if that wire is good all the way to the PCM, but there was something that happened that told us unequivocally the PCM is awake. We knew the PCM was awake.
Turn the switch to motor turn.
No, that doesn't have to do with anything with the PCM. That's the ignition switch. There's a point to what I'm saying, guys. If I send you to get a no start and you come back and say, I can't get it started, then I'll say, okay, F, and I'm going to move on to the next thing, right? If you can get it started, and I don't know how many times I sent somebody, go out there and get this car and bring it in. It won't start. Isn't this an auto mechanics course? Start the dadgum car. Figure out what's wrong with it. Don't come here and say, I can't get it started. That's like, when you send your, all right, whatever. What do we do? The way we knew the PCM was awake, and I said this out there when we were standing there at Crown Vic, but nobody was listening. We saw the fuel pump. The fuel pump. The PCM operates the fuel pump. If the PCM is dark and dead, you will have no fuel pressure even if everything else is okay, because it is what turns on the fuel pump. So if I saw it turn on the fuel pump, if you switch on the key and you hear the fuel pump go wing, you know the PCM's awake. You don't even need to think about that. Got me? If I switch on the key, I want to save myself trouble. I'm a little bit lazy, and if I can find a shortcut, I'm going to. So when I switch on the key, if I hear a fuel pump, I know the PCM's awake. Secondly, if you're not sure if the PCM's awake or not, in spite of the fuel pump, like if the fuel pump don't run, and you want to see if the PCM's awake, you go over here and what do you do to find out if the PCM's awake? What's the quickest way you can find out if the PCM's awake and doing what it's supposed to, as far as being woke up and trying to do things? I'm going to go to my throttle position sensor, and I'm going to back probe that signal wire. If I see 5 volts there, where's that 5 volts coming from?
PCM.
PCM. That way you know the PCM's powered up. Daniel, remember the cruise control on her car. That says you go into the wire that comes from the switches, you switch on the key, you go into the blue wire with the black stripe on that Mercury Mariner, go in there, and I see 8 volts there. What's that telling me? That's telling me the cruise control module's powered up and it's grounded because all of that voltage, the voltage is being generated by the cruise box. So if I can do one test that eliminates some others, that's what I'm going to do. Now your book's not going to tell you that. I came up with that. If I go into that thing and I see 8 volts, I'm through checking for powers and grounds to that module because I know it's already got it. Powers and grounds is important, but you're going to know it. If the fuel pump runs, you know the PCM's up. If you got 5 volts coming out of it, you know it's up. What if I go and I find no 5 volts there? PCM's either that 5 volts is shorted to ground somewhere, which will kill the PCM and keep it from doing anything, and you can't even talk to it with a scan tool, or the PCM ain't powered up to begin with. Okay, so if I go to the power relay on a Ford vehicle, powers up the injectors, powers up all the solenoids that the PCM operates, and it powers up the PCM on pin 71 and 97. Okay, what if I went up in the harness about this far from the PCM, and I went snip? Okay, if I cut it, or if somebody laid it on something and it chafed and it cut that wire in two. Or, of course, at first it started to blow a fuse, but the long and short of it was, if that wire was somehow compromised by some yo-yo that was trying to put a stereo in his car and he cut that red wire because it had power, then the PCM's going to be dead, but you're going to have power at the injectors, right? I got power at my injectors, but my PCM don't have power because it's, real close to the PCM where it's going in there. Depending on 7197, I've cut that, and so it's not going to have any power there. So you got to be able to sort this stuff out in your mind. So just use your common sense. We found out there was no signal coming to the injectors, didn't we? There was no clicking. There was no. We got his test light, his handy dandy O'Reilly's funny looking test light. It works though.
It works.
Yeah, and ours was all busted up, so we had to borrow the good one from O'Reilly. But
right.
Anyway, and I've got 7 or 8 or 10 test lights, and all of them are either lost or messed up, or we don't know where they are. Great guys, appreciate that. Hook it up to positive. Go to the wire that triggers the injector. I want to see a pulse. A noise light will do that. If you got one of them funky little lights, and you can build you one with a really, really weak, like an LED, couple of LEDs hooked together so that they're, the long lead and the short lead are like this. Because one of them's going to flash, even if the polarity is wrong, either way you plug it in, it's going to flash. I built one like that. The noise light won't mess up the drivers and the engine control. That's why I'm telling you. It's real weak, and so you got to make you one. So I got no pulse. And so then what were y'all trying to do? What was your next thought when I found out we didn't have any injector pulse? We knew the PCM's awake, but it ain't firing the injector, so what's the deal? What did we do? You remember what we did? Huh? We went to the wire schematic, we found the injectors, and we found out that there was a connector in between the PCM and the injectors. What was it, 272 or something? I can't remember the number. All right, and 127, you're right. And then we went to find the location and a pinout on that. And he says, that's that old big square one back there that's got that bolt that pulls it together. And I said, I bet somebody just kind of clicked it together and didn't tighten that bolt. And so I asked him later when I heard the car start up. I said, what was wrong over there, Lee? They pulled the motor out of the car and put it back in, He says, Joe didn't tighten that bolt. So Joe gets blamed for it. Well, see, this is I'll tell you what's really embarrassing. You're the guy that has changed the motor out, and you've tightened all the bolts and hung all the solenoids back in place and got your brackets like they're supposed to be. But now you got to go find somebody else to help you start the car because you can't figure out why it won't start. That's how this little boy over here that was going in his Jeep. He had just done a bunch of work on his Jeep, Grand Cherokee. And he was sitting there. This was an OJT guy that just pulled off the street that hadn't been to school or nothing. And he had BS'd his way into, getting a little job where he could do. And he's sitting there in his Jeep going, rah, 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 looking real disgusted. Rah, 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 rah. He's going to burn the starter up, Rah, rah, rah. He's just sitting there, just spinning the starter. And he's the one that did all the work under the hood. And I said, hey, it ain't going to start. Okay, you're gonna have to get out. And we got over and found out that he had he didn't put the crank sensor connector together good, and it sprung back apart. I mean, it was not hard to find out what was wrong with it, but all he knew how to do was just sit there and spin the starter, you know, and he was the one that had hands-on on that thing. Anyway, I don't want you guys to be like that, though. If you need to go find out why something won't start, you need to methodically work it out. Now, when Daniel and me went to this electronic cruise control thing the other day, we checked to make sure that we had power coming through the brake light, you know, the brake on-off switch, you know, the pressure switch from there. And we also wanted to see if we got ground coming through the stoplight bulbs. We found out we had good switches because we checked the switches, and we also checked for power and ground there, but the 8 volts changed every time you mash one of the switches, you know, so the switches are so good. And we had one thing we had to check, Daniel. What do we have to check to finish that up?
The signal.
We had to check the signal on the speed. The gray wire with the black stripe was carrying vehicle speed. We didn't know if it was getting that or not. So basically, we hooked up our little celerity scope, and we saw a pattern. And I said, now then, we've checked everything else that's going through this thing. The cable is not broke going over here to the throttle. Everything's fine. So we go to the salvage yard. We get a $40 part, and we pop it on there, and she's cruising.
Well, okay. That Crown Vic got a 4.6, right?
It does.
That F-150 got a 4.6. Okay. Now, what was the different course? Why you took a different course of action on cranking this car than you did that F-150?
Well, I knew that engine would run because it was running when they pulled it in. Now on the F-150, it was basically an engine that was a pig in a poke. We got it from a salvage yard. We put it in there, and I was listening to it, and it didn't have compression. You know, I kept saying, this engine ain't got no compression. It was going, and every now and then it'd go, boom, it'd pop out. I mean, it started once, and then it died, you know, just briefly. It didn't run half a second, and it died. And after that, it would try to fire on one cylinder, which is probably the one that had 99 pounds of compression. And then I kept saying, well, it's backfiring out the intake. Let's see if y'all got the plug wires on right. You remember I kept getting you to revisit that? And it turned out the plug wires were on it right. Now we checked the compression. It's got lousy compression. Darn thing won't start. If it's got lousy compression. They didn't need to do all of that over here because I knew that motor would run. They pull the motor out. They put the motor back in. If you know the motor will run, you just say, they left something loose. You know what I'm saying? And on yours, the sound of the engine was telling me there was something mechanical wrong with it. And I wanted to hear it go, no, you know, I want to hear it squeezing air. If it's squeezing air, then I'm going to be looking at injector pulse and all this kind of stuff. Of course, we checked spark on that one. You know, I pulled that thing loose and it was lightening off, you know, so I know we got spark. And so that's how I did that. That was a good question, though, that you just asked. But listen, pay attention with your ears. When you hear one spinning over, you can tell if it's right or not. And we're going to be really interested in how Lundy's Escort engine sounds when he finally gets all of that stuff put back together. He got the pan back on, the crank's in it, the pistons are in, the rings are on there. I cut my finger on one of the rings yesterday. It's been bugging me ever since. But anyway.
You get a new crank sensor.
Huh?
It was a crank sensor.
We're going to have to get another crank sensor because somehow or another that one there wound up, something sawed into it, and I saw copper wires sticking out everywhere.
I had one more question before.
All right, talk to me.
You said you were listening to the injectors. Did you use a tool to listen to the injectors?
You can listen to the injectors with your stethoscope. Or if you got a long screwdriver that you can hold right, you can hold it, you know. My dad used to take a piece of hose when he was adjusting these carburetors on these old 67 Volkswagen squarebacks, and he would listen to the carburetor with a pipe. Then he would work on them a little bit and adjust them, and he'd listen some more, and he'd get it purring like a kitten. But you can feel that injector sometimes and feel it clicking. You just put your fingers around it, and you can feel it clicking if you got sensitive fingers. And I've done that before. You know, I actually felt them to see if they were clicking. And I like, if it's best to listen or have that tool that you bump it and it flashes every time it clicks. You know, that little, did I show you that? Yeah, that little tool is handy, $60 for it. Little easy probe thing.
So you can just put it on there?
Well, you tap it like this to turn it on, and the little light blinks, and every time it hears a click, that light flashes.
Oh, I saw that. You showed that. I see.
Yeah, a little orange pistol grip thing.
So then you just tap it on each one to see.
Yeah. Do I have spark? Do I have fuel pressure? Do I have injector operation? That's the three biggies. And listen to see if you got good compression. You know what I mean? I mean, if I go out here when I'm planting a bug and I spin one of these engines out of time, or if I take the valve covers off of a 4.6 and I take all the rocker arms out, that would be nasty, wouldn't it? Or if I take one valve cover off and take off half the rocker arms, you know, how about that? All right, so I could get really nasty if you want me to plant bugs. I can take you places you've never been before and probably never will.
I like those places.